So in the previous video, we actually got our most of our challenge working. We got the ability to actually go forward to the playlist, to the next song in the playlist that is, and also to go back to the previous one. So let's now hopefully finish off the rest of the challenge in this video. So what we need to do is, firstly, we didn't actually print a menu option, the actual correct options that are available for the menu selection. So we'll do that first so we can see what the relevant options are. So I'm going to first put in here, in the play method, once we've determined there are some songs in the playlist, we're going to actually print out a menu. So we're just going to create a print menu method. We'll call that print menu. Print that there for the first time. And also going down the list, we've actually commented that out. So I'll actually uncomment it there as well. And we'll actually create that method. And of course, that method is only going to literally print a menu. So private static void print menu, no parameters. And we'll just put available actions, press, and the options we're going to be are, we talked about some of these, 0 to quit, so it's actually to leave, and 1 is to play the next song, which we saw working in the previous video, and 2 of course was to play previous song. Option 3 is going to be to replay the current song. We haven't developed that method yet. Oops. And option 4 is going to be to actually list the songs. So for list songs in the playlist. And option 5 is going to print this, is just essentially going to be this menu option itself. So 5, print available actions. Available actions, like so. And that's literally it. That's that method now. So that's fixed that up. So that's good. So again, we've got it working. So it's actually showing the next song in the playlist and also enabling you to go forward, but also to go back as well. So the next thing we actually want to implement is we want to implement the ability to actually show a list of songs. So we're going to actually print the list of available songs. So that's using this print list command. So we'll do that one first. That's menu selection 4 or case 4. So the code for that is going to be private static void, and it's print list of course. And the parameter passed is going to be a linked list of song objects, and we'll call that playlist. So firstly, we need to create an iterator. Iterator equals playlist dot iterator. And because we're not going backwards and forwards, we don't actually need to use a list iterator. So I'm just going to show you how to use a regular iterator, which works for lots of different types of objects as well. So it's very much the same, but it doesn't give you the capability of going backwards. You really need to just continually go through forward. And it's perfect for sort of looping through something once, which we're doing in this case. So let's then print out some equal signs here just to make it clear in the output. So this is the start of the output. And then we'll just put while iterator.hasNext. So while there is another song to be displayed, and you simply put systemout.println, and it's going to be iterator.next. Now note that I could have also have put .toString, but that is actually the default option. In the previous video, I actually put .string, but that is optional. Sometimes it can be a good idea to put that in so it's clear in your code what you're trying to do. But as you can see, it actually accepts it and works quite nicely without it. And then the only thing we need to do at the end of that is actually just print out another set of equal signs so that we can clearly see that the list is available and actually there. So that's good. So that's actually working nicely. So really the other main thing we need to do now is, the last thing is case 3. And that's actually in the situation where we want to actually play or replay the song. So what we can do is, by being able to replay the current song, we can take advantage of the fact that the list iterator is actually somewhere between the previous and the next. So in other words, it's somewhere in the middle. So one of those will give us the track we last started playing, and from there we can work out which one to use. All we really need to know is which direction we were moving in at the time. So for example, if we were moving forward, we're just after the currently playing song, so we need to go back because we're in a forward position. But if we were actually going backwards, we were be going to the previous one, then we're just before the current song, so we need to go forward. So in both cases, we've changed the direction, so we need to set forward appropriately. So if we're going forward and go back to play the same track again, and then forward, false, and vice versa. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but let's put the code in, and hopefully by looking for code, it'll actually make more sense. So the first thing we need to do is determine the direction. So we'll put an if forward, and we'll do the code firstly for the situation where we were moving forward. Then we need to check if there's a previous. So if list iterator dot has previous, we can put a message now replaying plus list iterator dot previous, and we can put .toString there if we wanted to, remembering that that is optional because that's the default method anyway. So we could actually take that out like so if we wanted to, but I'll put that in there for now. Else, if it didn't have a previous entry, we can just put we are at the start of the list. Then, so at that point, we then need to do an else and actually determine whether we're going backwards. So we put an else here, we put else. So if we weren't going forward, we do a list iterator dot has next. And now replaying plus list iterator dot next dot string. And what I didn't put there, I should actually, whoops, made a typo there, but also we do also need to set the status because we're actually we've done the check for previous, and then we've gone into forward direction. We now need to set forward equal to false. So we've checked to see whether there's a previous one. We've gone to the previous one, but then we've set forward to false because, of course, we're telling the system, we're keeping track of the fact that we're now going backwards, which we had to do to replay that song. So contrasting that, in the other situation where we were going backwards, then we need to actually set forward to true. Forward equals true because we've had to go forward in order to actually replay the song again. So hopefully that actually makes sense. Then we just need an else here as well. And the else is just going to say else we have reached the end of the list. So that's essentially the code there. And that's again, so if we currently were moving forward, we then check to see whether there's a previous record. If there is, we actually move to the previous record and actually show the name of the actual song as it currently is before moving. Else, we just put a message to say that we're actually at the start of the list. And then the opposite applies in the case where we weren't moving forward. We actually go to the next record, replay it, and set forward the forward direction to forward, or to true, I should say, which means that we're actually going forward. So at this point, all options are now working, and we have a fully operational playlist. So let's actually just check that it does work. I'm going to run that. Okay, we'll make a bit of space here. We probably need a little bit more space. So let's just, option 1. So typed it in the source code. I'll go into here. 1. Now playing a Holy Man. We saw that in the previous video. That's working fine. Reach the end of the list, and I can't go any further, so that's good. We can go back. Going just back to the front, to the first entry. So forwards and backwards is working nicely. Let's actually replay the song. At the start of the list, we can't do anything because we haven't played one. So if we play a song, first one, and now if we actually replay, we're replaying it. And if we go to the next record, or the next entry in the playlist, I should say, and replay it, that's working. And if we go back in a previous direction, number 3, that's also working as well. And we can go back again at the start of the playlist, and of course we'll get the fact that we're at the start of the list. So that's all working correctly. And if we do option 4, that should be our printout. That's the list of the songs in the playlist. You can see that's working. That's all the entries that were added to the playlist. And option 5 should be our menu option, which of course just repeats the available menu options. So that's now working fine. But there is actually another option. Remember that we also had a case we talked about optionally in the challenge. If we just close this down, we'll go back and look at that. As an optional extra, this is right down the bottom here, provide an option to remove the current song from the playlist, and hint was list iterator.remove. So we'll add a case 6 for that. That'll be case 6 here. Case 6. And we could do something like if playlist.size, if it's greater than 0, we could type list iterator.remove. And we're doing the check to see whether playlist is greater than 0. Probably don't need that anyway, because up here we did test to see whether the playlist was greater than 0, or if it was equal to 0. So you'd think at first glance we wouldn't need to test again, but because we've now introduced the capability of deleting entries, we do actually want to keep that. We do actually want to have that facility in there to be able to test each time to see whether there's still some records in there, because we could have actually deleted all the records. If that's the case, we don't want it to throw up with an error automatically. But there's actually a potential issue with this. Well, firstly, we'll just check that it does work. So if we actually try and delete one, well, firstly, we need to go to a song. So we're now playing Holy Man. If we try and actually delete it, the option 6, and we actually have a look at the songs, we can see it's actually there and it seems to have worked. It's actually removed that song correctly, the current song we're playing. But if we do a 6 again, we actually get an error. So the actual issue here is to do with the way that the list iterator is actually set up, the linked list. So it can only be made once per call to next or previous. So it actually throws an exception if neither the .next or the .previous has been called. So in other words, each time you delete a record, you then have to do a .next or a .previous to avoid getting an error if you try and do it again. So we need to actually guard against that. And that's actually built into the actual linked list code itself. And you notice I talked about an exception. We haven't actually dealt with exceptions yet, but that's actually a way to actually trap an error. By default, Java will give you an error like you can see on the screen there, illegal state exception. We can actually trap those using a try catch block, and we'll be doing that later in the course. So for now, what we want to do is we want to just change our code to avoid this exception coming up. And generally speaking, that's a good idea to do that. If you can code something so that you're not actually getting these exceptions, that's good. But later on, if you do get exceptions, you can guard against that, and we'll be doing that in later parts of the course. So let's go back and actually fix this so we can delete or remove records without any ramifications. And firstly, what I'll do is I'll quickly add this to the list. The menu option for 6, which will be 6, which will be delete current song from playlist, like so. Okay, so we can now see what that option is. So the actual code, so what we did, well, there's actually 2 ways we can handle it. The one would probably be to use the exception, which I talked about, so we could actually try and catch that error if it comes through in that code and perform some action. But because we haven't actually talked about exceptions yet, we're going to leave that. So what the other alternative is at this point is to ensure we call either next or previous immediately after removing a song. And that ensures that if you try to delete the next record, we don't actually get an error again. So it's actually not really that difficult to do. What we really need to do here is just after this remove, we put if list iterator dot has next. So if it's got a next record, now playing list iterator.next. So in other words, we're actually just automatically going to move to the next record if there is one available. We'll put else if list iterator.has previous, now playing list iterator.previous, like so. And obviously we still need a break here as well, which I didn't actually have before. Okay, so at that point, that should actually work. So what we now do is we're actually doing, if there are still some entries available in the playlist, so we're checking to see whether the size is greater than 0. If there is, we're going to remove the current one. But then what we're doing is that really are ensuring that either there's a next available entry or there's a previous, and one of those will have to be true in order for this to have succeeded, playlist.size, because if that was equal to 0, we wouldn't have got into be executing this code anyway. So what we're doing is we're making sure that one of these is actually executed, and that's going to avoid the error in the future, because it means that we actually move to the next record or the previous record, depending whether there's a song that's actually available going forward or backwards, and that will actually stop that error from actually happening. And really what we're saying we're doing here is if we do actually delete a song from the playlist, the next song automatically starts playing. That's really what we're trying to say here. So automatically by default it will go to the next song, but if we happen to be at the end of the list, then it would go back to the previous song. So it will just continue on, in this case playing, and that's why it's automatic. So let's just run that and make sure it works, and we should be done. So again, we'll actually just look at our list of songs. And so next we'll actually go forward a song, play next song. We're playing Holy Man, so we should now do a delete. Now playing Soldier of Fortune, you notice that was deleted as well. We could delete that, and so on and so forth. And we go back and have a look at the list of entries that are there. We could go to the next one. Next, we're at the start of the list now. Sorry, that was previous I was selecting. And to go to the next one, next. Next, we've reached the end of the playlist. And we do a delete there. Now playing Let's Glow. It's actually automatically figured out, even though we're at the end of the list, it went back because it couldn't go forward and then deleted that entry, and we're not getting those exception errors anymore. And again, looking at the list that's remaining, we've only got 2 songs left in our playlist. So that should be it. That should actually be the challenge now. We've actually finished everything. Okay, so that's the end of this section. We've now looked at linked lists in detail. We went through the theory behind their implementation, and of course we worked on the Java implementation of it, and then we actually created the program, and then obviously there's challenge as well. So hopefully you can get an idea of what a linked list does. There's actually, linked list is just one example of many different data structures. We've got trees, queues, hash tables, and maps, and many more, and we'll be dealing with some of those as we go through the course. So just keep in mind that there's lots of different ways to go about resolving common computer issues using a variety of tools that are actually built into the Java software development kit, which is pretty cool. And linked list is obviously just one of them. So thanks for watching, and it's now time to move on to the next section of the course.